Hello everyone, it's History Behind the Warrior, and welcome back to another Tekken 8 video. Seeing as you all really enjoyed that Yoshimitsu episode, and we are on the cusp of the next big installment in the series, I figured that today we could recap on one of the most iconic characters within the franchise, and someone that could be seen as the original protagonist before his fall from grace. Kazuya Mishima. But in order for us to understand this character, for this recap to really work, we gotta dial things back all the way to the early 90s and see just how the character has evolved and changed from installment to installment, as the Tekken series itself is no novice when it comes to retcons, alterations, and changes. Thus, for this video to work, I will be using information from old manuals, arcade ladder endings, as well as their current iterations, as it does streamline their stories and narratives going forward. Plus, it helps remove any convoluted fluff that could make things quite difficult to explain. But before we begin here, if you're liking the Tekken coverage and do wish to see more, please do give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and don't forget to tick that bell with everything we do here, because by doing so, it's usually the best indicator of whether or not you're actually liking this content. As honestly, I'd love to cover more Tekken. So with that said, let's begin. Now, the tale of Kazuya Mishima is a very unique one. Once having a promising future as the hero to usurp his father's throne, only to wind up being something so much worse. But how did this all come to be? How did Kazuya wind up the way he is? Well, we must actually dial the clock very far back to that of his childhood to truly get an understanding of his upbringing, as his family life not only impacted Kazuya as a character, but the overall narrative as a whole. Which now takes us to his family. Kazuya himself would be the offspring of Kazumi Hachijo and Heihachi Mishima, an all-Japanese family that was part of the Mishima Zaibatsu, a post-World War II industrial empire whose fortunes were built on war. But despite their wealth and heritage, their patriarchal figure, Jinpachi, sought to have them forge a new meaning behind their name, one through martial arts. But how exactly does Kazuya fit into this? Well, being the child of a Mishima naturally destined him for greatness. Yet, the relationships he shared with his family would largely fluctuate from person to person. For Heihachi, he detested his own son, treating him as weak and beating him more than he actually trained him. Whilst Heihachi deeply loved his wife Kazumi, that did not reflect in their son, showing only but contempt and disappointment. Yet for Kazumi, she showed endless admiration and love for him, whilst she had married Heihachi for far more sinister reasons, as we will soon come to see. Kazuya was without a doubt the best thing to have come out of their relationship, and even Jinpachi would largely follow suit, seeing a young, strong, formidable fighter that could very well be a prodigy in the making. He would take Kazuya under his wing and teach his grandson their style of Mishima karate. Yet, in the following years, devastation would strike within the family. Heihachi, having grown envious of his father, as well as his lack of ambition with the Zaibatsu, had him be overthrown and imprisoned beneath their family dojo, left to starve and die under Honmaru. With his father out of the picture, the Zaibatsu would be reformed back to that of its former being, with him now as head of the company. But little did he realize his betrayal would quickly spiral into the rest of his family. You see, whilst Kazumi loved Heihachi and Kazuya, she had actually been planted there by the Hachijo line, a family of guardians and global protectors, as a failsafe should Heihachi's lust for power get out of hand. So with him taking his first step to power, Kazumi would be forced to kill Heihachi, marking it his very first encounter with the Devil Gene. Yet, even with all of that power at her fingertips, Heihachi proved to be far too strong, and with much regret, was forced to kill her. This death cast a haunting omen over Heihachi, as it made him turn his gaze towards Kazuya, and out of fear, spite, and hate, would cast his son off a cliff, believing that he could be inflicted with such madness. Yet, in an ironic twist of fate, it was actually Heihachi himself that activated Kazuya's devil gene, as it was what made the young man survive. So it's this catalyst here to which the rest of the Tekken saga would actually begin. Now, the devil gene itself has undergone quite a change from its original inception. Whilst in the first game, it's believed that Kazuya made a deal with the devil, as he needed to overthrow his father. In the ongoing, ever-expansive canon, the devil gene itself is more of a genetic anomaly that is also quite supernatural in nature, being partially sentient, of whom it taps into. Thus, from game to game, the devil gene tends to be tweaked up here and there. Even so, it's still a formidable genetic advantage, granting you supernatural abilities. This can take form as super strength, the ability to fire lasers, and most infamously, granting you a completely new form that embodies its very name, with Kazuya, of all characters, being the one to control it the best. Now, following Heihachi's attempted murder of Kazuya, the details aren't entirely clear as to what happens in between the awakening of the devil gene and the first tournament. But we do know that upon returning back to the Mishima estate, Heihachi, out of sheer spite, would adopt another child, that being Li Chaolong, someone that could contend with Kazuya's position to inherit the Zaibatsu. Sadly, very little was actually known about their relationship, as they seem to be very distant from each other, despite being raised in the same household. As the years passed, Kazuya would leave his home of luxury in order to refine his skills, still seeking to destroy his father. But he knew that the only way he could do this is by going from tournament to tournament in preparation for such a battle, with the only adversary giving him trouble being Paul Phoenix, a brash yet impeccably talented fighter. After winning tournament after tournament, it would eventually all culminate in the very first game, Tekken 1. And during this installment, the king of the Iron Fist tournament would be announced by Heihachi Mishima, an international competition that would pit the world's best fighters against each other. And seeing this as a gateway to overthrow his father, Kazuya would enter as the prodigal son to usurp the Mishima Zaibatsu. Tragically, the finer details surrounding the events of the first game are extremely shady, just due to the limitations of canon storytelling during the arcade era of games. But Kazuya would succeed in winning the tournament and overthrowing his father. Yet, not before exacting his own revenge on him, as Heihachi would be taken to the very same cliff he had dropped Kazuya off, suffering the same fate. Now, the events of Tekken 2 is an extremely important turning point for Kazuya's character, because in the original game, whilst he's largely seen as the main protagonist, as the new head of the Mishima Zaibatsu, he ruled with a bloody fist that eclipsed anything Heihachi had done. The Zaibatsu swayed towards assassination, extortion, kidnapping, animal experimentation, and so much more. I mean, for Christ's sake, he seized a Japanese island to build his own nation, a mere catalyst for his ambitions of world domination. At this point, it's honestly pretty hard to say just how much of this was actually Kazuya's own hand, or the devil gene's influence. But the surge of Kazuya's villainy did end up attracting Jun Kazama, a Japanese woman whose bloodline was known for suppressing the devil gene. The true nature of their relationship has always been kind of ambiguous, never being fully explored or touched on in the expansive canon. But we do know that they would conceive a child, and that Jun's attempts to cleanse his soul failed, as he continued to reign the Zaibatsu and even announce the second King of Iron Fist tournaments, using it as an exhibition spot for his power. Yet, the arrogance of Kazuya would be his downfall, as his father had survived, seeking the return of his company. So Heihachi would enter the tournament to bring an end to his son's reign. And as expected, this would be the match at the tournament finals, devils. Despite having won their previous encounter, Kazuya was pushed to his very limits, being forced to even tap into his devil form to contend with Heihachi's vast strength. By the end of it, it simply wasn't enough. To ensure that Kazuya was gone for good, he would be taken to the mouth of a volcano and dropped into it. Heihachi had won. Now, Kazuya is completely absent during the events of Tekken 3, only resurfacing in its 4th installment 23 years later. But what did become of Kazuya? Well, after being left for dead, his scorched remains would be recovered by G Corporation. Knowing of the properties of the Devil Gene, as well as the strength that Kazuya possessed, they believed that they could harness his vast power, as well as weaponize his genetics. So prior to the events of Tekken 4, Kazuya would be fully revitalized by G Corp, restored to the man he once was. However, on the devil side of things, there was something missing. Something that I will be touching on later on. Understandably, the resurrection of Kazuya did catch the attention of the Zaibatsu, whom upon learning of this would have their headquarters ambushed, gunning down any that stood in their way until they came across Kazuya, awoken and pissed. Smelling his father's fear, he would execute the Tekken squad, letting Heihachi know that he was next. Thus, this takes us to our 4th Iron Fist, as Heihachi announced another tournament to draw him out. So during the 4th game, Kazuya would participate in it, getting as far as the finals itself, as his son had mysteriously disappeared. Father and son would do battle once more, and much to his surprise, he would lose to Heihachi. But instead of them dropping each other into a cliff or a volcano, the old man would take him to Honmaru Dojo, finding Jin chained and bound. But this was exactly what Kazuya and the Devil Gene had wanted. During the events of Tekken 2, Jin's conception had actually split Kazuya's devil half in two, with half of it in Jin and the other half sealed away in himself. Hence how and why he lost to his father in the second tournament. So Heihachi had unknowingly served up his other half on a silver platter, causing his devil side to rise as he sought to unite both sides. But much to his surprise, Kazuya is able to gain control once more, and this actually marks a key important point in the series, as it now shows just how much control Kazuya has over his darker self. Yet, much like the tournament, he is defeated once more, heavily underestimating his son as well as his fighting capabilities. So this now ties us into the opening of Tekken 5, where just after Kazuya's defeat, the dojo would be attacked by G Corporation. Having seen the threat that both sides posed, they saw this as a way to kill two birds with one stone. Thus, Kazuya and Heihachi are forced to team up together, ripping apart a squadron of Jack 4s. But eventually, in Kazuya's nature, he would of course turn on his father, tossing him at the feet of the Jacks as the temple explodes. But in Heihachi's supposed death, the man that laid beneath Jinpachi would rise. So during the events of the 5th installment, the demonically resurrected Jinpachi is able to regain the Zaibatsu, with Kazuya himself actually hunting down the heads of G-Corp. And of course, in typical Mishima style, another Iron Fist is announced. We don't know how far he made it into it, but it's largely believed that he abandoned it, as his main focus would be on that of G Corporation following their betrayal. This then leads us into the events of Tekken 6, with the fall of Jinpachi and rise of Jin Kazama, now having full control of their family empire. In a shocking twist of events, in between the events of Tekken 5 to 6, with near endless funding at his fingertips, Jin would announce an all-out war against the world, following in his father's footsteps of tyranny. Yet, in secret, this had all been done to draw out the precursor of the Devil Gene, Azazel, as Jin believed that by killing its source, it would fade away. Thus, Jin had to frame himself as the villain to achieve his goal, making Kazuya the hero in the public eye. In retaliation to his attack, as well as a way to draw out his son and his other half, Kazuya would place a bounty on his head, knowing full well that in turn another Iron Fist tournament would be announced. And like clockwork, it was all set in motion. Yet, as events progressed, Kazuya would eventually learn of Jin's plan, immediately setting off to stop him. He is almost able to confront Jin till he is halted by his half-brother, Lars Alexanderson. This fight would end in a stalemate, with neither side gaining the upper hand. Because of this, the frustrated Kazuya would retreat, but not before warning Lars the nature of their family to fight and betray one another. Now taking us onto our next game, Tekken 7, and with Jin's presumed death following Azazel's defeat, something that did not result in the end of the Devil Gene, mind you. Heihachi would once again return to power, with Kazuya at this point honestly not surprised, especially with him announcing another Iron Fist. But one thing that did catch him by surprise was the mysterious figure attacking Heihachi. Akuma, the demon incarnate, had come to pay his toll as the last will of Kazumi, being given the mission of killing her husband as well as her son, as Kazumi knew what could become of him should she fail to kill Heihachi. The fight between Akuma and Heihachi does lead to his supposed death, as well as a clash between himself and Akuma. Yet, sadly before this fight can have a true conclusion, the still alive Heihachi would have an orbital strike hit the pair, obliterating his headquarters and tarnishing Kazuya's name by revealing to the public his devil form. Yet somehow and some way, Kazuya is able to survive the strike, and in retaliation to his father, uses a laser to strike down their satellites, causing the Mishima name to be tarnished as it crashed and burned. Knowing that this feud needed to end, the two would meet for their final battle atop a volcano, being pushed to their very limits until they were exhausted. It is ultimately the youth, skill, and tenacity that allows Kazuya to deliver the finishing blow, killing Heihachi, and to guarantee his demise, he would drop him into the mouth of the volcano, marking the true canonical end of Heihachi. It's also worth noting that the very end of the game does have an extra chapter, in which Devil Kazuya would battle Shin Akuma. We don't really know how truly canon these events are in the post-game, but with Kazuya returning in Tekken 8, it is very possible that he won this encounter. With Kazuya's victory, he would pick up where he left off, global annihilation. With the Zaibatsu crumbling and Jin in hiding, there was none that could oppose his might. Yet, with the sudden return of Jun Kazama, and Jin learning how to harness his devil gene, the Ouroboros cycle of the Mishimas continues to turn. Yet at this point, is it very well possible for Kazuya to fall? Well, you gotta play Tekken 8 to find out, as we are about a month or so away from release now. And I must say, as kind of convoluted as the ever-expansive lore and canon of the Devil Gene is, Kazuya is a really compelling character that helps carry said narrative. Because on paper, it's like the perfect revenge story, where the prodigal son defeats the evil father. But Tekken defies those expectations by having him be infinitely worse. It's only through his son where we get a more definitive protagonist to the franchise. But even then, he's made some very questionable decisions to obtain his goals. The story of the Mishimas is always one painted in a shade of grey, believing that the end justifies the means. But Kazuya, that man is just straight up evil. So, with that said, I'm very interested to see how this all concludes, as we've never had a mainline game where Jin, Jun, and Kazuya were all present at the same time. So with that said, that has been it for me. I really hope you're enjoying the Tekken content, as I'd love to cover more in the future. But as always, if you want to see more, please give this video a thumbs up. But for now everyone, that has been it for me. So as always, stay strong, stay well, and keep on fighting. I'll catch you all in the next one.